appreciate it. It's so good to be with you guys. I've been really looking forward to this, and it's just a blessing to look around this room and see so many men who are really leaning in on things that really matter, and that's so important. And Richard, thank you so much for what you shared, and that spirit of what we call audacious authenticity is really what sets Impact Players apart in many ways. And there have been a lot of times over the last 5 years that I've been leading this Impact Players ministry that I've asked myself the question, God, why would you put me in this role? Like, I don't feel like I meet, quote, like the manly stereotype that, a men's ministry leader is supposed to have. Like, I mean, I'm not, 6'4", former linebacker, lumberjack kind of a guy. But I think that, to me, the kind of man that we're trying to raise up is not something that you see from the outside, but it's something that flows from the inside. And, I don't know how many of you, if you were to be totally honest right now, when Richard shared that moment in his life, when he was talking about like laying on the ground in the fetal position, like that is a moment that many of us as men will find ourselves in at some point, maybe not physically, but emotionally, where we just feel like we've come to the end of ourselves. We have no hope. We just feel like we're completely exhausted. The weight of the world is on our shoulders, and we don't think we can carry on. So many of us have been in that position at some point in our lives. And as I was thinking about this talk today, I went back to a moment in my own life, very similar to what Richard was talking about. I was about 28 years old. I'd been married for a few years. I had my first child. I was, knee deep in the career and the ministry that I was pursuing, and we had moved to a new city, and I just was like 110% going at it and trying to be that man that I thought I was supposed to be. And then I started going through some struggles in my marriage, and the challenges of being a young dad were catching up. The financial struggles of barely getting by and trying to figure out how you're going to make it work. Things that at work weren't going the way that I thought they should or they would. And all of a sudden I had this terrible, terrible realization. And it was that I don't have any friends. Now, I used to have friends. Middle school, high school, college. Always had a group of friends around me. But after we had moved from seminary to Georgetown, South Carolina, I just got right after it with my life and my family and my work and all those kind of things, that it never even dawned on me that I needed to build some strong friendships with other men. And I've kind of come to believe that I'm not the only one that feels that way. And how many of you guys enjoy camping? Anybody like going on camping or hikes? One of my favorite things to do when I go camping is to gather around a campfire. Any other pyromaniacs in the house today? I love playing with fire. I always have. And there's something about just kind of poking at that fire while you're sitting around telling stories. And, one of the things I've observed over the years just poking at that fire is if you take one of those hot coals that's burning bright and glowing orange and you just kind of tap it away from the rest of the fire, what happens? It turns black and it just dies. It loses that heat because it's become disconnected from the rest of the fire. And that's where I think a lot of men find themselves. Maybe for you it's in your 20s, your 30s. A lot of men, it's in their 40s and early 50s where they start to feel like that fire inside of them has died. That they just feel kind of dead inside. They just feel kind of cold and lifeless in a way that is unfamiliar to them. And that's what happens when men get isolated, when they get pulled away from that band of brothers. Maybe for a while the glow stays, but after time, that fire begins to die. And that's what we've kind of come to now understand as the epidemic of loneliness. Isolation among men is a major problem. 63% of all men experience what is called chronic loneliness. I want to just point out a few of the signs of chronic loneliness. In fact, if you can see this screen, let me just get a few volunteers to read out these bullet points here. Just call it out if you can see the screen.
Inability to connect with others on a deeper, more intimate level.
Thank you.
Many acquaintances, but no close friends.
Feelings that no one gets you.
Overwhelming feelings of isolation, even when surrounded by a large group of people.
Negative feelings of self-doubt and self-worth.
Feeling exhausted when trying to engage in certain activities.
Thanks, guys. How many of you guys ever felt any of those things before? I'll be honest, I still do from time to time. And there's one that I didn't see, but I've added it onto my own personal list. And it's just this overwhelming feeling that everything is on your shoulders. And that's a hard place to be when you just feel like, man, you know, the family finances is on my shoulder. The well-being of my wife and my kids, the things that are going on in my home, everything that's happening in my business, all of those things, it just seems like I'm the one carrying it. And so when I talk to men about this idea that every man needs a band of brothers, I almost universally get a nodded head. Yes, I agree. I think that's important. We all need a band of brothers. And then I say, do you have a band of brothers? And most men are like, I don't know if I could say that. I did, a while back, I was in this group, back in 2018, but since the pandemic, not so much. And, and I say, well, hey, do you want to get plugged in to a band of brothers? And so often I'll hear men say, yeah, I don't have the time right now. I've got kids, we got, sports, we got business, all these different things. And what I would just encourage you men with is, what if I could give you an extra 5 to 8 years? Because if you didn't know this, there are a number of statistics that show that men who have 4 to 8 vital friendships can add 5 to 10 years to your lifespan. Now, if you want to flip that around, the absence of vital friendships in your life is stealing 5 to 10 years from your lifespan. These are secular studies that have been published and reviewed. So this idea that we don't have time, I think that's an idea of the enemy. And I want to tell you that, guys, I think one of the number one lies that the enemy tells men, listen to this, I can handle it on my own. That is a lie from the enemy. And there is a principle in life and a principle spiritually that simply says the lone wolf dies first. In the Bible, Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it gives a description of how God created the universe and everything in it. I'm sure most of you guys have heard that story at some point. And every day, at the end of the day, when God created the light and the earth and the vegetation and the animals and all those things, every day during those 6 days, He would say, it is good. And when He created mankind in His image, He said, it is very good. Most of us are familiar with the it is good statements, but how many of you know the first time God said something was not good. Okay, I see a few nodded heads. You guys have cracked your Bible open a time or two. It is not good for the man to be alone.
Who said that?
Quoted by God himself. Okay? For these next few minutes, I want to talk a little bit about how do we get there? How do we build that band of brothers in our lives? And one of the first things that I think is so important for men, and really for everybody to kind of come to terms with, is seeing the difference between loving a band of brothers, loving true friends, and just simply loving the idea of true friends. Loving the idea of a band of brothers. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said it well. He said, the only way to have a friend is to be one. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer gave that great quote about community that I think fits in so well with us today. But most guys love the idea of a band of brothers, but they're not always willing to do what it takes to invest in building it. Brotherhood isn't found, it's really forged. And so I want to talk about how to forge a band of brothers. And the first one is simply this: we've got to be intentional. How many of you guys started off the New Year's with some resolutions? Anybody? Hardly anybody. Wow. Wow. He said he's over it. Okay. You know, this idea of resolutions gets a bad rap because most of us drop them by the end of the month. But I think it's really important that when we think about what it is that we want our lives to be, what we want this year to be for us, that we begin by really being intentional. When I was a youth pastor, I used to tell people that I was looking for fat volunteers. Terry, did you ever use that one before? No? Faithful, available, and teachable. Okay? It's a great acronym. I've used it for years. But here's what I've realized about most men. Most men do not believe that they are available. They say, oh, I don't have time. I can't make it work in my schedule. I'd love to, but I won't be able to do it. And here's what I've kind of really come to believe is that we don't need fat men. We need fit men. We need men who are faithful, intentional, and teachable. And that intentional thing really comes down to priorities. What are you going to make a priority in your life? Are you going to be intentional about building those deep friendships with other men? And I talked about earlier in this talk that moment where I realized that I didn't have any friends. I was 28 years old. Marriage was struggling, family was struggling, career was struggling. I realized I was all alone. And it was at that time that I kind of had this very spiritual epiphany. And I say it's 4 words that will change your life. Okay, this is very spiritual. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Here's the deal. Here's what I found with most guys. They're waiting for somebody else to take the first step. They're waiting for somebody else to say, hey, why won't you invite me to your gathering? Why won't you invite me to your Super Bowl party, or to spend time over coffee or whatever it might be? And here's what I'm here to tell you guys: be the one to pick up the phone. Be the leader. Be intentional. And when you do, I'm going to give you 4 more words that will change your life. Just ask this question: tell me your story. Get together this week with somebody in this room that you don't know that well. Maybe you had to look at their name tag when they walked in to make sure you got it right. That's okay. Say, hey, let's grab some coffee this week and just try this out. Just say these 4 words: tell me your story. I guarantee you, in the 45 minutes to an hour that it takes for each of you to kind of share a little bit of your story with one another, you're going to walk out of that meeting feeling like, man, I've got a brother now. I've got a friend that I can really, begin to walk through this life with. It's so simple. Sometimes we feel like we've got to make it more complicated. But I'm telling you guys, just be intentional to ask that simple question. How many of you guys are married? Any married men? Okay. So at some point, you had to ask that woman out on a date, right? And here's what I want you guys to understand. We talk a lot about our cohorts, and if you get into a cohort, it's not going to guarantee that you're going to have a band of brothers, but it's going to put you in proximity of a potential band of brothers. And here's what I want to tell you is you can have a friend. Like when I was in college, my roommate was the one that got me into the room with my future wife, Leah. So he helped me get that proximity, but I had to take the step to ask her out. I mean, I still remember picking up the phone. My hand was shaking. This is back when you had phones that attached to a wall. And picking up that phone and saying, hey, do you want to go out this Friday? And she said yes. And I said, okay, bye. That was it. I had to call her back and iron out the details. But the point is that when we talk about being intentional, it means you've got to take a step to risk a little bit. To be willing to say, hey, I want to build a friendship with you. I want to have a close relationship. Will you be a brother in my life? Because that's what we're all looking for. And we need men to pick up the phone and to be intentional. The second thing is this. Be sincere. Be sincere. Our digital world that we live in breeds insincerity. Our life is falling apart, but our Facebook is spotless. We're barely making ends get by, but according to our LinkedIn profile, we are crushing it. Our marriage is really struggling, but if you look at our Instagram, woo, that trip to Acapulco looked pretty darn nice. The digital world that we try to put out oftentimes breeds insincerity and a fake life. And so I want to tell you that to experience true friendship, you need to be a truthful friend. You get that? Are you hearing that? You're never going to get true friendship if you're not a truthful friend, if you're not willing to be sincere. And there's a legend about that word sincere. Maybe you've heard this before, but the word sincere is a Latin word that means sincero, without wax. And the legend behind this word is that in ancient Rome, unscrupulous merchants would cover up the cracks and the brokenness in the pottery that they were selling to passerbys with wax. And so, people would go into Rome and they'd need to get that pottery and they'd buy it and they'd bring it home and then they'd put it in the hot summer heat, or they'd stick it in an oven and that wax would melt away and they'd realize that they had purchased a broken and cracked pot. And so this idea of sincera, without wax, became prominent during that time where marketers would say, this pot is without wax. In other words, what you see is what you get. Yeah, you're getting a few cracks in this pot, but there's nothing that's disguising what you're really getting. And I think that's something that we as men need to really commit to if we're going to have that band of brothers. Quit trying to impress and start trying to develop close relationships with other men. The truth is that I'm a broken pot. I'm cracked. I've got things that are leaking in my life. And I need other men to come alongside of me and walk with me through that not just be like, oh, wow, he's great. He's got it all together. That's not going to get me anywhere. I remember a couple years ago, I was watching a documentary about the Los Angeles Lakers. It was called Showtime. And there was a story about those, famous 1980s Lakers, the Showtime era with Magic Johnson and James Worthy and Byron Scott. And in this one particular season, Byron Scott was not playing at his usual elite level, and the team was struggling, and they were losing games even though they were one of the most talented teams in the league. And at some point during the season, Byron Scott goes to Coach Pat Riley, and he says, Coach, I got to tell you something. I'm really struggling right now. He said, my mom's a drug addict. She's falling apart, and I just feel like I'm carrying all this, and I don't know how I can keep going. And Coach Pat Riley said this. He said, why don't you tell your team what's going on? And so after a practice, Coach Riley brings the team together. He says, guys, Byron's got something he needs to tell you. And Byron begins to share what was going on with his mom and the fears that he was experiencing and just the burden that he had for her. And in that moment, that team of basketball players rallied around Byron, and something really special and remarkable took place. They began to support and encourage one another, not only on the court as professionals, but off the court as brothers. The documentary goes on to talk about how they started eating dinner together 2 or 3 nights a week. They started interacting as families with one another, and they cared for Byron through that hardship that he was experiencing. And the rest of the story is that Byron's game picked up, and they ended up going on to win the NBA championship that year. And I remember as I was watching that documentary, I thought to myself, man, that's what we all need in our lives. A place where we can come together with other men and we can be honest and say, hey, I'm struggling. My marriage, my family, my career, whatever that might be, my spiritual walk, I'm having a crisis of belief right now, whatever that might be, that we could get to a place where we could get with some guys and we know that they're not going to judge us, they're not going to come down on us, but they're going to rally around us and grow with us. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And the truth is, we don't need more companions. We don't need more social media followers. We need some true friends that stick closer than a brother. Here's the last one. We want to be intentional, we want to be sincere, and we want to be sacrificial. Jesus looked at his disciples and he said, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. And then Jesus defined what true friendship looks like. He said, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. So here's what sacrificial friendship looks like in 2026. It means putting the interests of the other guys in your group ahead of your own. It means being willing to lay down your pride. It means being willing to ask for forgiveness when you've offended a brother. It means not holding a grudge against somebody who did you wrong. It means being willing to give a little extra to help make sure that your brother is taken care of. When we get down in those pits, we need somebody that's going to stop what they're doing and take the time to lift us up. And so we want to be those kind of friends as well. So at the beginning of this talk, I talked about the coals and the embers. And I asked you, what happens when you take that coal and you tap it away from the rest of the coals in the fire? And we all know the answer to that. It dies. But it's not completely dead. Because if you take that same coal and you bring it back into the fire, what's going to happen to it? It's going to reignite. That glow is going to return. That spark is going to come back. That fire is going to burn bright again. And guys, that's what we're looking for here in 2026 in Goose Creek, in Summerville, and Charleston, South Carolina. We're looking for a group of men who are on fire for the Lord, who are passionate about their commitments to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders. And the only way that you're going to get that passion that you once had, that spark that once defined you, is if you get with others who are pursuing hard and hot after God alongside of you.